Hey everybody, this is Erica, the technology nerd who likes to film stuff. I'm finally back from France and I'm going to be doing a video today in my studio thing here. I am excited. So I've got two phones here. This is the Galaxy S5, this is the LTE-A version, or the G906S, and then we've also got the LG G3. This is the Cat 6 model. Both of these have the Snapdragon 805 SoC inside of them, and I want to bid them against each other because I think the result is kind of interesting. So if you're curious about the Prime devices, I would like to get into that right now. I also want to say that I will be doing a giveaway of the G906S. I will be giving this device away when all is said and done. Please stay tuned for details because I don't have that worked out quite yet. I just want to let you know I will be giving this phone away, and that is thanks to 28mobile.com, who also gave me this device as well. Thank you so much, 28mobile.com, for sending these devices out to me so I can look at them. 28mobile.com tends to have phones that aren't so easy to get in other places in the market, so I definitely recommend them. They have a 28-day money-back guarantee, so if you want to know where I got these from, thank you again, 28mobile.com, and let's go and bid these against each other now. So what are the Prime devices exactly? We've heard the word Prime thrown around everywhere, and at least to my knowledge at this present moment, I have not seen any device that's actually been released with Prime attached to it. We've kind of just taken Prime and attached it to an original phone that has better specs than that original phone. So for example, we have the LG G3 original, and then beside it we have the S805 or Snapdragon 805 SoC that's been placed inside the same phone. Otherwise, the specs are very similar. The specs are the same otherwise. It's just a little bit higher powered device. And then right next to it we have the Galaxy S5. This is the G906S. LTE-A version. Actually, both of these are LTE advanced. So yes, the basics here is that these are two devices that were released only inside of Korea that have a little bit better specs than their originals. So the question here would be, why should I care about that if these are not going to make it into the United States? Well, the first thing is that these are interesting to look at because newer phones that are going to be coming out will have the Snapdragon 805 SoC inside of them. So this kind of gives me a little bit of a preview of what to expect, kind of getting ahead of the curve on knowledge of how these perform. And as for the consumer market, if you are somebody who has not purchased a Galaxy S5 yet, or you have not purchased an LG G3 yet, I think that if you can afford these options, that they're actually really great. For the G906S, I already made a video about this device saying, yes, I really prefer this one to the original Galaxy S5 because the display really is what I would have hoped for on the original Galaxy S5. It looks really, really nice in comparison. The extra pixel density really does make a difference on AMOLED because of that pen tile matrix that they use. Yes, it's the newer Diamond Matrix pen tile. It's not as noticeable as the older pen tiles, but it makes a big, big difference now that this pixel density is just so high. And what I liked about the G906S is that you're not compromising on battery life. Really, I think that the performance ended up being pretty much the same as the original Galaxy S5. You've just got a little bit higher specs and a better display. Now, as for the Cat 6 version of the LG G3, what I am finding is that it is a better version of the original LG G3. We all waited holding our breaths to see how the LG G3 would perform when we found out in rumors that it would have a Quad HD display. And as I've been playing with it, I've noticed that the performance is really not all that great with the Snapdragon 801 SoC inside of it. I think it really needs something more powerful to deal with the sheer amount of pixels on this display. And once this version came out, with the Snapdragon 805 inside of it, with a better GPU, I knew that I had to check it out to see what the difference is or if it really mattered at all. And my findings are definitely yes. If you're going to have a Quad HD display, please don't go with the Snapdragon 801 inside of it. Please don't go with the Snapdragon 800. On a flagship device, we should really see better performance than what this gives, and this one definitely does do it. Before I get into some benchmarking, I do want to mention that the battery life, that was something that I really hoped would improve with the new SoC inside of it. But what's interesting is that the battery life pretty much feels identical to the original. I get about 3.5, 4 hours of on-screen time. If I put the brightness on low, I get about 4.5 hours of on-screen time. So that's the same for both of them. I can get through the day, but really if I'm playing games on either one of these, the battery is dead within a few hours, and it's not so good. So let it be noted that we have the exact same size battery inside of the Cat 6 LG G3 and that the battery life, I think, is exactly the same. Also, I am seeing that the displays are the same. The sharpening is still there. Now, the sharpening is something that people either notice and really do not like, or it's something that others really don't notice. It's really going to be up to you whether that sharpening bothers you or not. But if you don't notice it, please don't get all high and mighty and pick on those who do and don't like it. In the same way, I will tell you, I'm not telling you to dislike the display or dislike the sharpening. Whatever floats your boat goes. But the interesting thing that I have seen between both of these is that they have seemed to change the calibration a little bit. They have adjusted what they've done with the saturations. Originally, the LG G3 was incredibly oversaturated. It was just so ridiculous how saturated the colors were. But I've had a chance to look at some measurements and it looks like LG did have a little bit of a change of heart. So that sharpening is still there, but the colors are not as ridiculous. Another thing that I am noticing is that the temperature of the display on the Cat 6 model that I have right here is a lot more favorable than what we have on the original. The original is actually quite blue. That white balance is really quite blue. Where I can see that this one has a lot less blue in it. Now that's something that I can't really call a feature of the Cat 6 model because it's very possible that we have Cat 6 models that are bluish out of the factory. And it's very possible that we have original G3s that are more warm out of the factory. That's something that I would like to hear about. If you can make a comment down below in the comment section and tell me if you've got a more bluish looking G3 or a more neutral looking one. Because what I figure is that even though this one is nicer in terms of the white balance, it's not an exclusive thing. Now what I want to do now is run some benchmarks on these devices. I'm going to start off with Quadrant. I want to do much more than benchmarks because I really don't feel that they tell the entire story. You get a much different result at one point and at another, so this is just the very first thing that I want to look at. So after doing a Quadrant run, you can see that I've got them actually in order right here from what I've noticed as a trend. This is the highest performing to the lowest performing. What I noticed between these two at least is that the Galaxy S5 G906S performs ever so slightly better than what we have with the LG G3, and of course both of them are a bit faster than the original LG G3. So now here we have results from Antutu. You can see the same trend happening here where the G906S does a little bit better than the Cat 6 G3. And then both of them, of course, are doing better than the original G3. Now in terms of what this ends up looking like in the real world, especially when just comparing these two, I really do see the difference in everyday life. Just going about the phone, using the phone, opening apps, closing apps, seeing the animations on the phone. There's a lot more stutter on this phone. This one looks just so much more smooth and the experience is a lot nicer. Opening apps is a little bit faster. Closing down apps is also a little bit faster. So I really do prefer the performance experience of what we have on the Cat 6 G3. Now looking at Velamo web browser benchmarking scores, we can see that Chrome, again, we see this exact same trend. There's just something about the G906S that does a lot better here and there. So for Chrome browser, you can see that it's descending across the board. Then looking at single core and multi-core scores, this one still wins out over all of them. So the last synthetic benchmark that I want to look at is called GL Bench, and you can see I've got the high-level tests pulled up here so we can see how well these devices deal with on-screen and off-screen graphics in terms of frame rate. So you can see again I have them according to the trend in descending order from best performer to least performer. And what really stands out to me here is just how much better the G906S performs compared to the original G3. Then you have the Cat 6 G3 somewhere in the middle here. So for on-screen frame rates, you can see that the increase definitely is there. It's not hugely significant in these tests. I think that the increase really stands out here in the off-screen computations. But it does a little bit better for T-Rex. When looking at these benchmarks, I have to wonder what makes the G906S perform so much better than even this same SoC version of the G3. I suspect thermal throttling. But in terms of benchmarks, the G906S reigns king supreme. Now, despite what the benchmark said, I actually wanted to test them out in the real world, play some games, see how the performance actually is in reality. Now, of course, what I find with the original G3 is that it doesn't play as smoothly as I would like it to. It's got a lot of pixels to push around. We're already seeing that the SoC is not as capable as it should be in order to handle a display of this caliber. So I noticed a lot of games didn't play at the frame rate that I would like them to. Games were definitely playable, but I could tell that it struggled a little bit. So in came the LG G3 Cat 6, and I was very excited to play with it to see what the performance difference was like, is to see if it was performing any better. And interestingly, what I found between both of these devices is that on most games, they seem to perform exactly the same. So there is an application that is called Game Bench that allows you to benchmark actual applications so you can see how that application plays on your device. So I played a lot of games. I played games for 15 minutes. This particular application wants you to play in 15-minute runs so it can get enough data. So I ended up playing the exact same games, exact same levels for the exact same amount of time almost. I benchmark a lot of racing games because they're very fast moving, and when there are frame drops, you can really see them with your eyes. So for example, I played GT Racing 2, which is a graphic intensive game. I see that it doesn't really go over 30 frames per second. It looks like there's a lot of games in the Android market that don't go over 30 frames per second. And then there are those some games that are able to do 60 frames per second. We'll look at one of those as well. So for GT Racing, I noticed that the performance is just so very similar. If you look at the resources used for the CPU, RAM, GPU, you can see it all looks pretty much the same. And then for performance for frame rates, you can see we've got a median of 27 frames per second and a median of 28 frames per second. And we can bunch all those data points together so we can get a better look at the trend. And you can see that they both hug along that same line there. It looks very, very similar. What I love about this application is that you are able to touch these different data points and you can see the exact frame as you're going along. So for example, you can see that we've got these little dots that are outlying. This is usually right at the beginning of a race, whereas the rest of the time it seems pretty constant. It's the same on this one. The ones that are outlying are usually at the beginning or the end of a race. So I was happy to see at least that the performance in a lot of games is very similar, although there is one that really did stand out. It's actually my favorite game that stood out. This is called S805. This is a game that is, again, very graphic intensive and can hit upwards at 60 frames per second, depending on your device. So taking a look at this one, this surprised me. Now look at the performance difference. This one has a median of 46 frames per second, and this one is 25 frames per second. When actually looking at the data, I'm able to see that while the G3 can hit near 60 frames per second, it's more grouping more towards downward here. Now sadly, what I see with this game is that it jumps from high frame rate down to low frame rate pretty quickly sometimes, and the result is that it looks very, very jittery. While on the Galaxy S5 it looks just fine. It doesn't do what this one does at all. It was pretty funny because on the original G3 I thought it looked pretty sad because the frame rates weren't so great. But at least what I saw with the original G3 is that it's pretty much constantly at a lower frame rate, where this one just plummets and goes up and down. So the result ends up looking even worse on here. So judging benchmarks, overall performance, and battery life, I would definitely have to choose this as my number one. But of course, if choosing between both of these devices, I know that this one does perform a bit better. I can't say that the increases are incredibly groundbreaking or anything, but it is noticeable in day-to-day usage. But the G906S is going to remain my favorite, and I'm happy that I'm going to be able to give it away! So thank you everybody for watching. This has been Erica, the technology nerd who likes to film stuff. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. If you have any other questions about these devices, please ask them in the comment section below. Again, in terms of the giveaway, I will release details as to how I'm going to do that. I really don't know at this moment, but definitely hang tight for this. Make sure to check out my Google Plus page. I'll put a link in the description or somewhere for you to click. Just say yay here, because I might release information on there as well about the giveaway. And when I'm not doing video reviews, I release a lot of updates on my Google Plus as well, so that's something that you might want to check. So this one wins, but this one's really not a bad performer at all either. Have a good night, everyone.